Well, this week we're starting a new series called Choose Your Own Adventure. Choose Your Own Adventure. I don't know, how many of you read these books? If you remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books? A few of you. I didn't read much as a kid, but this was one of my favorite books to read, were the Choose Your Own Adventure. If you don't know what it is, you read a few pages, and at the bottom of the page, you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision, and based on that decision, you'll turn to a certain page. So if you choose A, you turn to page 100. If you choose B, you turn to page 120. And so they come out with some new books, and so I love reading these with my kids. And it really gives me a glimpse into who they are, how brave they are, how much courage they have. And I know it's just a book, but it's interesting. Just recently, the book I read with Cade, it gets to this point where they're staying in a house on the beach, and there's a mysterious light down on the beach. And the question is, do you go down onto the beach to see the mysterious light, or do you stay in the safety of your room in your house? And I couldn't even finish, and Cade's like, go to the mysterious light. Go find out what's going on. I'm like, no, we don't do that, right? We don't go investigate mysterious lights, okay? In the book, it's okay, but in real life, please don't ever do that. But one thing I like about this book is I have a little bit of control. I have a little bit of control of what the end is going to look like. I kind of have a say of what's going to happen. And so I want to take just a couple of weeks. This is going to take us to Easter, looking at some characteristics that I think are important for us to think about. Some decisions that we need to choose between. And the reason we're doing this is because I think you find yourself where you are today because of the decisions you've made in the past. I mean, honestly, you're where you are right now basically because of the decisions you've made in the past. Now, in saying that, let me just preface that with this. There are things that happen in your life that you have no say over. A lot of the pain that you have experienced or you're experiencing now is not based on anything that you've done. You've lost a loved one, someone else has made poor decisions. There's some things in life that you just can't explain that seem random, and that's true for all of us. My wife and I and our kids, we just spent a couple of days in Chicago, about 48 hours, ran up there for my kids' spring break. And I have one of my best friends, best man at my wedding, lives in Chicago. In the last couple of years, we had lost touch, and I felt bad going into Chicago and not spending time with my buddy. And so we're up in Chicago, and I'm thinking, should I call him? Should I not call him? Yeah, I don't want to be rude and say, hey, can you meet here in an hour? So I thought, I just won't call. He's not going to know I'm up here, and so it won't really matter. And so we go to the Museum of Science and Industry. I don't know how many of you have ever been there in Chicago. It's 400,000 square feet. 400,000 square feet. Over 1.5 million people visit this museum every year. There's 10 million people who live in the Chicagoland area, plus tourists. And we're at the end of the day yesterday, and we're going to go see something in the basement. My kids want to take a detour and check something out one last time, and we're walking into this space, and I look up, and there my best friend stands. Unbelievable. And we make eye contact, and it's one of those what in the world? And we hug, and my wife's behind me, and she's like, who is he hugging? I can't see who it is. And we interact for a few moments, and we left that place, and I thought, my kids got tired of me talking about it, because I was just like, how random is that? Right? There's no possible way that I should have ran into my buddy. No, I can't explain it. I can't understand it. And there's things like that happen in your life. You just can't explain it. It has nothing to do with the choices you made. But if we're honest, and this is the hard part, if you look at your life, if you look at your relationships, if you look at your finances, if you look at your job, if you look at the things you struggle with, often those come back to the decisions that you made and the decisions that I made. And so we're going to spend a few weeks in this series looking at some of these decisions that we have to choose between. It's going to seem like they're easy choices. When we talk about it and I lay out the two things, it's going to seem like it's an easy choice, but it's usually not that easy. It's usually somewhat difficult to make good choices as we look at this. And some of us make choices and we've immediately regretted it. Some of us know we're going to regret it before we even say yes, before we say no, before we eat it, before we drink it, before we watch it, before we spend time there, whatever it is. You know that you'll regret it, and yet you still do it. And so we have to figure out what this looks like and how do we begin to make good decisions. And so the one I'm going to look at today, I have to be honest, I don't like. I don't like. I told my wife yesterday, I was like, I just feel like sometimes God lays something heavy on my heart and points something out before I even am able to communicate with all of you. And so I just want to let you know as we head in this direction today, I wish I could be sitting with you. And so I'm preaching to myself today. I'm trying to figure out what this looks like in my own life. And so today, we have to make the choice between discipline or disappointment. We have to make the decision. What will you choose? Will you choose discipline, self-control? We're going to use those two words interchangeable. Discipline and self-control, or will you choose disappointment? And so we're going to try and start with Proverbs, these wise sayings from a guy named Solomon. And so we're going to start in Proverbs, and then we're going to back it up with other stories in the scriptures. And so if you don't own a Bible, we'd love for you to have a Bible. That's our gift to you. Please take that. If you want to use that this morning, if you brought your own, great. If you have a smart device and want to pull up YouVersion, a Bible app, please do that. I think it's important to actually read what we're talking about. But we're going to look at Proverbs 25:28. The thought is this guy named Solomon wrote these to his teenage boy. And the thought is, as we go through this series, is he had an idea of where he wanted his kids to go. He had an idea of what he wanted their future to look like. And so most of these Proverbs are really setting them up to get there. And that's what we have to look at today. What decisions are we making today that are going to help us get where we want to go? Proverbs 25:28. It says, like a city whose walls are broken down is a man who lacks self-control. Like a city whose walls are broken down is a man or woman who lacks self-control. I think what Solomon is trying to say here is that we're defenseless. We're defenseless. We're weak against the things that pressure us, that tempt us, that want to lead us astray when we don't have discipline in our life, when we don't have self-control in our life. When we become disciplined, we'll begin to build up a defense against those things. The things that want to keep us from where we're going. Discipline and self-control will help us get there. As I was studying this week, I came up on this definition of discipline, and I believe it's referenced by lots of people, but I think I ultimately found it was an American psychologist who said this. Discipline is about choosing between what you want now and what you want most. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. See, the key is that most of us choose what we want now. We choose what we want now. We know what we want our future to look like. We might know what we want most, but it's difficult because we're in the now. And so we make decisions based on how am I going to feel if I do this or if I eat this, or we base our decisions on the now. And so if I asked you, and maybe you want to jot this down, maybe this is something you work on in the next week or two. Where do you want to see your life? So in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, at the end of your life, what do you want your life to look like? What is the most important thing? Where do you want to be? What dreams do you have? What would you want your family or your home to look like? What financial situation would you hope that you're in? What struggles do you hope are in your past? How would you want your spiritual life to look? And so you have to get to okay, well, what's the most? What is the most that I'm wanting to get to? And then you begin to ask yourself, well, how do I get there? How are the decisions I'm going to make today, the disciplines I'm going to put in my life, how will it help me get there? One of my best friends, we went to high school together and college together, played football at both places, and then he's here in St. Louis and is a part of Trinity. His name's Danny. Danny has lost a significant amount of weight over the last couple of years, around 100 pounds. And so when I was working on this, I sent Danny a message, and I just said, hey, I just have a question. What role did discipline play in you losing all your weight? And it was almost immediately that he came back and said, I would say 75 to 95% of my weight loss came back down to discipline. To discipline. He said that impacted the sacrifices he made, his routine, pushing through excuses, setting priorities. I know the meal plan that Danny had. I know his trainer he worked out with, there was a discipline that had to take place for Danny. It didn't just happen. Danny 2 years ago didn't say, man, I need to get healthy. I've got 2 twin boys. I got to get healthy. And that he didn't just wait. He didn't just hope that in 2 years that 100 pounds would be gone. He had to put some discipline in his life to get there. And then he said this, and this fits so well. This was perfect. He said discipline helped him get through the disappointing moments. That it was believing that in the discipline of setting up himself and doing what was right was going to pay off in the long run. And so sometimes when we're disciplined, there's disappointments that still come along. But it's in the midst of being disciplined in our life, of having self-control, that will help us get where we're wanting to go. Like a city whose walls are broken down as a man or woman who lacks self-control. Where in your life are you defenseless? Where do you feel like things are out of control? And then just ask yourself, is there discipline there? Is there any self-control that's happening? And so as I look about this, and I look at my own life in some certain areas, it's hard. It's much easier to choose the now than it is to choose what matters most and where we want to be. I love what Paul said. Paul was a guy who had an experience with the risen Christ. He hated the church. He hated Christians, persecuted them, and then he becomes one. And this is the language he uses, Romans 7:15. He says, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. I don't know if you connect with that. When I hear Paul say this, I see Paul as like this spiritual giant who did unbelievable things, wrote about a third of the New Testament. And yet I hear Paul use this language of there's some things that I want to do in my life that I just don't do. And then there's these things that I hate about myself. There's these things that I hate that I do that I seem to do all the time. So you sense the disappointment? Have you ever experienced that? The regret, the shame, the time after time when you know the decision you should make, you know what you want your life to look like, and yet you don't choose it. I resonate with Paul in this. I mean, the shame, the embarrassment, the anger, maybe the callousness that comes. Let me just point this out really quick. Sometimes the decisions that you have made, you know the outcome. And you don't want to make them. Yet you do. And I think what happens is we say things like, well, it's just who I am. I'm never going to overcome that. I'm never going to get through that. And so we become callous to it. And it just doesn't matter anymore. And so something has to help us break through that. And so we think, I'll just try harder. I'll just have more willpower. I'll say no to that. I'll walk away from that. And yet it doesn't always happen. And so he goes on, Romans 7:24-25. He says, what a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then I myself in my mind am a slave to God's law, but in the sinful nature a slave to the law of sin. It's like Paul saying, look, I've tried everything. I've tried every type of self-help book. I don't know if you know, that's one of the most sold books on Amazon and bookstores are self-help, self-improvement. Everyone is trying to figure this out. And it's like Paul saying, look, I've tried all of that. I've tried to do all the right things and say all the right things and put myself around all the right people, but nothing is working. And then he says, it's God. He's figured out that it's Jesus who allows him to work through this and to have discipline and self-control in his life. He's the one that's made things right. And so as we journey through this, just over the next 15 minutes or so, think about the things in your life. Think about those areas that are difficult, where you're choosing the now over the most, what matters most, or what you want most. And I would guess that is a spiritual issue. Now, you might be thinking, by calling it a spiritual issue, I'm not talking necessarily about your relationship with God. I think everything is a spiritual issue. I don't mean in the sense of where should I eat today, and so God, tell me where I need to eat. I'm not over-spiritualizing, but what I'm saying is that the topics we're going to look at today, the things that I'm imagining you're thinking about, are spiritual issues. Whether it's health, or money, or time, or relationships, those are spiritual issues. And so how do we begin to navigate those? How do we begin to have discipline and self-control? Well, Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 9:24. He says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? I'm going to stop here just for a second. Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? I have to admit, I'm a little competitive. I like to win. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, what I'm playing, who I'm with. I enjoy winning. And with my kids, as we play games, I've let them win for the most part. I have to beat them to keep them, level for the most part. But I'll tell you, we've gotten to a point now, there's a game I play with my daughter called Dutch Blitz that I usually cannot beat her. She's 11 and she's really good at it. And so now the competition is coming out in me where I'm like, okay, I can't let her beat me again. And I try my hardest and she beats me over and over. And so my competitiveness is there. I like to win. I pull myself away from events and I don't participate in some basketball leagues because I just get too competitive. But Paul is saying right here, look, everyone who runs in a race is hoping to get the prize. Everyone's hoping to get there, but look, only one is going to win. And so you might be thinking, well, why even run? But then Paul says this, run in such a way to get the prize. Even if you know you're not going to win, even if you know it's not going to happen, he says you run to get the prize. Verse 25, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. Some translations there say have discipline or good self-control. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. So we know this. March Madness happening right now. If you've watched the Olympics, any sporting event where the best athletes in the world, you know they have discipline to their lives. The training that they have is unbelievable. I just think of Michael Phelps, maybe one of the greatest of all times in the Olympics, and the amount of medals he's won. That didn't just happen. I mean, yes, his body is built for that. I think he might have webbed hands and feet. I'm not sure, but he has an ability that's greater than most of the people. But I'll tell you what, he knows exactly how many calories he eats. He goes into strict training to be the best he can possibly be. And he's talking, when Paul is talking about this, he's talking to this group in Corinth who would have had these games, this Isthmian games. And it was wrestling, it was chariot races, it was boxing, it was music and poetry. I'm not sure how that connected, but that was in these games together. And the hearers would know those people who had participated in this event. And they basically spent their lives preparing for it. They would strip off everything that would keep them from being able to win. If it wasn't going to be helpful, if it didn't prepare them well, they wanted nothing to do with it. And so we see Paul comparing this. And then he says, those people are willing to do that. They care about what that looks like. They care about winning for a prize that won't last. They may win and get a crown, but next year someone else wins. That the crown is going to possibly fall apart or be destroyed or rust or be stolen. They do it. They beat themselves up to win something that doesn't last. And then Paul says this, we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Paul is saying when we discipline ourselves, when we have self-control, it's for something that is much more meaningful than a trophy or a crown. It's the opportunity to bring honor and to bring glory to God, to experience real life. Verse 26, he says, therefore I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. He's not having discipline in his life for nothing. He's not choosing the now, he's choosing what he wants most. And then the last line, not my favorite, it's pretty much written more towards me. It says, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Paul is saying, look, I don't want to just tell everybody else. I don't want to just tell everybody else to have discipline and self-control because it's going to lead to real life. He's saying, look, he wants to live out what he's preaching as well. And so this is perfect for me. This is where I'm at with you. I'm trying to figure out how do I have more discipline in my lives. And so just a couple of questions we're going to wrap this up with. And it's based off of the definition of discipline that we looked at. And the first question is this, and you have to answer this. What do you want most? What do you want most in your life? And I'm not going to be able to talk about every area, obviously, but I just pulled out a few. And the first one I think that's really important, and this is where I'm at, is health. Health. I choose the now over what I want most all the time when it comes to my health. And I don't think it's fair to think someone is healthy because they're either a little overweight or they're thin. I have not been doing well with my health. I'm not taking care of myself. I don't eat well. The Oklahoma in me comes out often. We have one food group, and that's fried food. That's pretty much what we eat all the time. Every time I take my wife home, we have to detox afterwards just because everything is fried. When we first got married, I may have shared this story in the past. She asked me to cook dinner. She was working that night, and so she had bought some round steak. And so she laid the round steak out, and she said, "Hey, will you fix this for dinner tonight?" And I'm like, "Yes, I love round steak." And so I did what my mom had always done, what I had always known how to cook round steak. You take it and you put it in eggs, and you put it in flour or crackers, eggs, flours, crackers, and you fry it. And it's one of the most delicious things I've ever had in my life. And then you either mash that with mashed potatoes or fried potatoes, right? So fried potatoes, chicken fried steak. And so my wife comes home that night from work, and she looks at me and looks at the food like, "What happened here? What is this?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. This is the only way to fix this." And she said, No. Here, you may do this. You cook it in stewed tomatoes, and you fix it with rice. And I'm like, "That sounds horrible. I need fried." But all joking aside, there are times where I have no discipline. I have no discipline to what I put in my body, and I don't feel well, and I think that it doesn't matter. I think that I'm going to feel better by continuing to put junk in my body. So can I carefully and honestly say this is an area that we need to look at? That our body is a temple? That I don't want to get to the end of my life and think, man, God still wants me to do more, but because of how I treated my body or because of my health, I'm not able to do it. I mean, what I want most is to be able to love my family well for the rest of my life and hopefully into old age, that I want to serve God for a long time, but if I do not take care of my health, that won't happen. So am I sleeping well? Am I exercising? Am I honoring God with how I treat my body? Now, this is a slippery slope because it'd be easy to think this is about body image, but it's not. It's not about how other people see us or what we want to look, how we want to look for other people. This is about body health. And I really think this is a spiritual issue, and this is where I'm dealing with that right now. I can't continue to think that God is going to do something if I'm not willing to have some discipline when it comes to this area of my life. So health. Relationships, so marriage, dating, parent-child. What do you want most for those relationships? What do you want those things to look like? So are you communicating? Maybe you need to see a counselor. Are you having a date night? Is there intimacy? Are you serving one another? Are there spiritual conversations? This would be the homework for you. Read 1 Corinthians 13. Talks about what love looks like. And as you think about your relationships, are you able to say that this is what your relationships look like? The love that is laid out there in that. Or, if we don't choose discipline, as in health and here with relationships, will we be filled with disappointment, with shame, and regret? We have to choose between those two things. Money. Money is one of those things that we often live in the now and not what we want most. We had a house go up for sale on our street, just 2 houses away from us. Our really good friends moved away, and so we spent some time trying to find someone to buy that house. And so we were asking a lot of our young couples here at Trinity, we were like, don't you want to live by us? It'll be incredible. Like, this is going to be awesome. You should come move in. I know how much they'll take. Here's how much let's do this. You could live by us. And unfortunately, these young couples had been through financial peace. I don't know if you've ever been in financial peace. And they come back and say, well, we're saving cash for a car, and we don't want to have a big mortgage payment. We want to have a down payment, and we're looking into the future and not just the now. And I'm like, no, like, we want you to come buy this house now. And so for many of us, when it comes to finances, we live in the now. We live in the now. And some of you have to, because financially you're struggling and you're just hoping to pay bills. But the decisions we make, and I'm not going to spend too much time about this, we talked about this for several weeks, but our money, will we choose to have discipline, or are we going to be disappointed? Are we going to be disappointed thinking the things that we buy are going to make us happy, and then they don't? Are we going to have regret when we spend the money and then we wish we still had it? So we choose discipline or disappointment. Time, James in 4:14 says, you're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. How do you spend your time? Do you have discipline in how you spend your time? Do we waste it looking at a screen? The amount of social media, video games, whatever that looks like, are we wasting our time? How do you spend it? Are you disappointed afterwards, or do you have discipline? And then really the most important is spiritually. What do you want most when it comes to your spiritual life? What do you want that to look like? Are you willing to make some sacrifices and to have some discipline? To read scriptures daily, hopefully. To spend time in prayer. Are you willing to make some of those decisions? It might be difficult at times. The discipline in our life is not easy. But are you willing to do it because of what you want most? I would say all of us want our lives to look different in one area or another. That where we're at right now is not where we thought we'd be or where we want to be. But are we willing to make those changes to get there? Or do we think, I can just make the same decisions and maybe I'll get a different outcome? I don't think that's how it works. Like a city whose walls are broken down is a man who lacks self-control. What are the areas in your life where there's broken down walls? And you need to begin to repair them. And so we must develop a strong, consistent self-discipline so we can build up our defense. In 1 Peter 5:8, it says this, be self-controlled or have discipline and be alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. These are spiritual issues that we talked about. These are issues where we're not pleasing or bringing honor to God. And then just quickly, what are you going to do to get there? So what do you want most? And then what are you going to do to get there? Are you willing to be honest? Are you willing to make some hard choices? Can you begin to choose what you want most over what you want now? And here's one way that you have to do this, I think. And this is on my list. I know the person I'm going to call to invite in to my life to be a part of this, but it's the accountability part. If you're going to get to that place for the thing you want most in your life, you have to let someone in to help you get there. That you don't have to do it alone. That as I said before, we have to be a people who are grace-filled people with one another. That you can come and you can be honest and you can wrestle and you can doubt and say, look, this is where I'm at. That I can stand before you and say, look, my health is not good and I got to have someone who will step in and help keep me accountable to this and some other areas in my life. Are you willing to let someone in and not in a way they're going to beat you up when you fail? See, I think in the church for a long time, if you grew up in the church, accountability was something we were scared of because we felt like if we were honest with someone, then that person wasn't going to like us, they were going to be mad at us, they were going to treat us differently. But what if we saw accountability as an opportunity to help someone grow? What if it was an opportunity for someone to encourage us, to help us get to where we want to be? Galatians 6:1-3. This is where we'll wrap up. Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. So restore gently. So listen, if you get invited, so let me go on the other side. If you're invited to be someone's accountability partner, it's not your responsibility to beat up or condemn or to judge. It's an opportunity to restore someone gently, to offer forgiveness, to carry their burdens, whatever that looks like. And then in the end it says, if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. If you think you're too good, if you think you're not in need of this, that's what leads us to judge others or to think less of someone else. You're deceiving yourself if you think you yourself don't need the help. This is meant as encouragement of shining light into those dark areas of someone's life. And so as you think about what you want most, your friends are going to help you get to the future. Is it the future you are imagining? Are you surrounding yourself with people who are going to help you accomplish what you want most in the areas of your life? You get to choose. In this adventure that we're on, you get to choose. Will you choose discipline and self-control? Or will you choose disappointment? Would you pray with me? God, we need your help. It's not just about us having stronger willpower or trying harder, but it's about doing what we know God has called us to do. God, would you help us to look at those areas of our lives, to be honest with who we are, to ask the difficult questions, to invite people in. God, would you help us to figure that all out? Lord, I pray that we wouldn't look at only the immediate gratification of gratifying those sinful desires of our heart, of going to what's easy. Lord, would you help us to make those hard decisions in our lives? Would this be what all of us want? Would you help us, Lord, to choose discipline over disappointment? I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.